Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Today we'll be discussing episode 2 of the Halo TV show with full spoilers. So if you haven't watched it yet, as always, you may want to do so before checking out this video. There's your warning. Let's get right into it. So I'm unsure whether I liked this episode more than I liked episode 1. There were elements that sort of got me more engaged in the series, but there were also elements that I really found myself disliking. Overall, I think the visual quality of the show definitely took a bit of a jump this episode, though I do wonder whether that could be because there were no action sequences, which is definitely a whole nother discussion worth having. I was a little surprised that already by the second episode they were willing to go nearly 60 minutes without any action. No firefights, no Covenant warships, but I don't think that that's inherently a bad thing. It shows they're willing to rely on more than just action to carry the show. The real question is, was what they instead relied on any good? And a lot of my problems are really just continuations and even extensions of issues I had with even episode 1. I tweeted this thought earlier today and people have been reacting to it in different ways, some positively, some negatively. I said, I genuinely don't know what made Microsoft sign off on this Halo show after a decade and a half of rejecting scripts. Now, notably, I didn't say that the show is objectively bad or anything. It's just so strange to me that this is what they decided to go for when making a Halo show. First of all, as I said last episode, the tone is just completely divorced from what I was expecting. I compared it in a follow-up tweet to maybe a sci-fi or CW show, and I guess what I meant by that, and I think this is probably more appropriate to CW shows, is that rather than focusing on the universe and kind of the greater conflict at play here, i.e. the Covenant versus the UNSC, a lot of this show instead seems to be focusing on interpersonal conflict and interpersonal relationships, and from my perspective, that comes at a detriment to the overall story. It really feels like episodes 1 and 2 have been speed running several plot points in order to set up this kind of personal drama, which I think they expect to carry the show. There were, I think, 3 really good examples of this in episode 2, which I'm going to use to illustrate this point. The most example would be the human character operating within the Covenant. Of course, nothing like that really existed in the main Halo timeline. This show, however, has added a human because I think they need a sense of human drama literally driving the Covenant war effort. I think it was more interesting what Halo 2 and 3 did, whereas the Covenant leadership at the top is pretty much irredeemable, but they show that a lot of the underlings, as represented by the Arbiter, have essentially been manipulated, and that although they are fanatic and that they've been killing humans without remorse, it's understandable how things got that way. And the good aspect about the Arbiter that I quite like is that he's only introduced after Halo CE. Another thing that this show feels like it's been doing is trying to get the payoff from either twists or revelations without putting the groundwork in establishing kind of the basics. I talked about this last episode, but I don't really like how Master Chief and the Spartan program are already being deconstructed. You need to set something up, you need to establish Master Chief as a legend before really diving into the morality of being a Spartan. Surprisingly, I actually don't mind the character of McKee. I think it's because the actress actually brings a lot to the role. I'm still not happy that it exists in the show, but it's better than I expected it to be, I guess. We need to see more of the Covenant though, just generally. Another example of a shift towards interpersonal drama instead of kind of big military sci-fi drama, and yes, I know the two aren't exclusive, is Master Chief as a special individual among other humans. Now, that's obviously been the case forever in Halo lore, but I'm talking specifically about how he's able to access Forerunner artifacts as a reclaimer. Halo lore has moved back and forth on whether all humans are reclaimers or only specific humans are. However, the games show that every human who contacts Forerunner artifacts is able to activate them, and the extended lore shows that humanity as a whole was given the status of reclaimer through manipulation by the librarian. Moving this to Master Chief only, I think, takes some of the intrigue away because it seems they want to add more conflict to Master Chief being different than the rest of humanity, which is definitely something they'll be playing up throughout the show. The final thing I'll mention is the use of Cortana. Instead of just Master Chief getting Cortana, which was always a very advanced artificial intelligence and the first to really interface with the Spartans as she did, the show sets her development up as this big illegal thing that's eventually going to be a fight, and I just don't think that really adds anything, especially where Halsey has a lot of other valid war crimes that are sort of essential parts to the story. And if these were additions, I wouldn't really mind, but the fact is it feels like these interpersonal dramas was are going to end up being the center of the show. That's partially why I had a bad feeling when episode 1 already had Chief going rogue. And to me, this is going to get in the way of telling a story that's interesting in the same way that Halo the games are. Does that mean the story is going to be bad or the show is going to be bad? For me, probably yes, but not objectively. It just means I think that the tone and the story being told is going to be drastically different than what a lot of people were expecting. And I do think that that was ultimately in an effort to make the show more of an appeal to the average person. Whether that will work or not, I think it takes time to be seen. Personally, I think that Microsoft and 343 and whoever else made the decision to go with this script should have been more confident in the story that Halo had to tell. Halo's story, the conflict between the Covenant and humanity, the ancient Forerunners, I think is interesting enough. And like I said, it just seems weird that this is the script they decided to go with. One that I don't think really reflects anything that the Halo games are about, other than, of course, bits of lore and elements of the universe which are thrown in. Like, it's great that there's these amazing looking UNSC frigates and that there's Spartans and that there's all these things, but the more I watch the show, the more it feels like these basic aesthetic details are really the only similarities with the source material, and that's disappointing to me. I also think that having to tie all these conflicts largely to a single person ends up diluting the story somewhat, makes it overly simplistic. Another good example of that, which started to emerge in episode 2, was with the new insurrectionist leader. While the character itself seems okay, I just don't see that story being handled in a nuanced way whatsoever. And we can also see how characters which otherwise were small parts of a larger story, or rather small cogs in a larger machine, like Captain Keyes or like Miranda Keyes, have now been elevated to like the top tier of the UNSC. The final thing that I really didn't like about this episode was the fact that they revealed off the bat that Halo is a weapon, and that this random insane dude who had spent some time on a Covenant ship seemed to know everything about Halo. That takes a lot of mystery away from the ring, which is one of Halo's best aspects. Honestly, one of the most dramatic parts of Halo CE is where Cortana, having been left to sift through Forerunner data, makes the horrific discovery of the ring's true purpose and tells Master Chief, who's about to light it at the request of Guilty Spark. Like, most of Halo CE is about exploring the ring, finding out its true purpose, then for the last couple of missions, going off to try to destroy it, only after those other horrifying revelations have been made. Now it's going to be like they just want to blow the ring up, and that just sucks. But those are my complaints. The episode was otherwise alright. I didn't really like the space station. I especially didn't like the part where they went to, what was the mental asylum or whatever. That was pretty corny, but I did like Soren. I liked Master Chief. I liked Chief having that sort of history of questioning authority. I think had the other stuff about Chief not been featured, him gaining his memory back, the Forerunner device now making him question things, it would have been more interesting. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. Did you like episode 2 more than episode 1? How are you feeling about the series as a whole? Am I being too critical for your liking or not critical enough? I look forward to reading everything down below.